Last season, he recorded over 1,600 scrimmage yards. That's the 7th most in the NFL and by far the most on the Giants. In fact, the next closest two players on the roster combined had less than Barkley, and that's including their quarterback, Daniel Jones. So let's get into this, guys. And Jordan, I'll start with you. We're now 3 days away. Giants got to, or at least we think they got to get a deal done with their star running back. What's the latest?
The more I talk to people, the more I realize this has a possibility of not getting done, and which is surprising because for a while I thought, yeah, well, as we get to the deadline, it's going to get done. But you have to look at the details, and we're now 9 months into this, right? They started negotiating during the bye week, in early November of last year.
Yeah.
And now we're sitting here now, and they really, to be fair, haven't made a ton of progress in that 9 months. So the deadline is Monday, 4 p.m. They still have time to get a deal done. It's important to remember, though, when Daniel Jones signed his long-term deal, it happened at the last minute there. That actually allowed them to use the tag on Saquon. But yeah, with I think it was 6 minutes to spare is when they got a deal done. So maybe this regime just likes to work on the deadline and push it to the last minute. The key here, though, is going to be the guaranteed money, right? That's the key. I mentioned yesterday, I've been mentioning all along, $22.2 million. That's the magic number. That's this year's franchise tag and the franchise tag next year put together if the Giants were to use that. So far, everything I've heard is that the Giants haven't reached that threshold.
Wow. And you look at that list again, if we can put that up, you see Bijan Robinson there, 4th on that guaranteed list at $22 million. Hadn't played it down yet in the NFL. And yet Saquon,
once upon a time, Saquon was that guy.
Yeah,
he was the number 2 overall pick. And that's why we're like, hey, you don't draft a running back 2 overall because look at that money.
Look at those numbers. And, we think about whether Saquon is more than a running back or not. Mike Tannenbaum brought up yesterday an interesting point, Woody, on the show that Saquon should be viewed as more than a running back, kind of like Christian McCaffrey. Do you agree?
Well, for the Giants, he is more than a running back. He's their MVP. Clearly, he was the engine behind, everything that it was on offense. He was their playmaker on offense. But unfortunately, we live in a time where a lot of these running backs, particularly in the second contract, aren't getting a return on investment. And I think that's why the Giants are, steadfast on saying, you know what, we're just going to let this thing play out on the franchise tag. And so, listen, we all know Saquon Barkley is a tremendous player, tremendous running back, as well as in the passing game. But I'm just talking about the business of the NFL. We're seeing the business of the NFL rather than the actual play on the field by Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, it's a good point. Jeff, what's your read on this? You've seen a lot of contract negotiations go late. What's your read?
I would say that it does, to Jordan's point, feel bleak. When I have conversations with the Giants side of things and with Saquon's side of things, it doesn't feel like this is going to get done because, quite frankly, I think the Giants are perfectly fine with Saquon playing on the franchise tag. And I think that Saquon is looking at this not just as his own money, but also the principle of the position. And that's a little bit dangerous when we go down that line. The question, of course, here is, are these negotiating tactics? Are we talking about the idea that week 1 being in jeopardy? Is this just Saquon saying this, posturing to try to get the best deal out of the Giants? Because if he will play this season on the franchise tag, the Giants have no incentive to raise that money at all. They are perfectly fine with him playing on the tag. So we understand why that posturing has to happen. The question is it real or is it bluffing? And that's what the Giants have to figure out.
Could be a tough situation, Bill.
Absolutely. There's this incredible importance from Saquon Barkley to the Giants, but I think he's more important to the Giants than he might be to some other teams. You look at his receiving numbers and you try to make the case that he's like a Christian McCaffrey or like an Austin Eckler. It's hard to make that case. He does have nearly 100 catches over the past 2 years, but he's averaging 6.1 yards per reception over that stretch. That's the 3rd worst mark of any player in football. So what that tells me is he's the safety valve. He's not the guy who's going to get you big chunks as a receiver, but he's the guy Daniel Jones throws the ball to when he just needs to get the ball out to avoid getting hit. That's valuable to the Giants, but can you project him to be a McCaffrey-sized receiver or an Eckler-sized receiver? I don't know that he's been that guy as a pro so far.
That's really interesting because we do think he can do so many things, but if he's just a safety valve, maybe you can see where the Giants are coming from, making him wait a little bit.
Let me say this. When I look out onto the field, and I did this spring, and you see, okay, the Giants wide receiver court, they don't have a true number 1. We know that. Sure, they have Darren Waller. They have probably a below-average wide receiver core. They have probably a below-average offensive line. And then you look in the backfield. Look, there's Matt Breida, Gary Brightwell, and fifth-round pick Eric Gray.
Yeah.
Like, what does that offense look like without Saquon Barkley? Clearly, the Giants are planning on Saquon Barkley being there.
No question.
So as Jeff mentioned before, like, is whether they call the bluff or not, it's approximately $600K per game. I think the Giants, obviously by the look of that backfield and that offense without him, they expect him to be there.
Yeah, but they're like, are you really not going to show up when you're making when you could lose $600,000 a game? We'll see how that plays out. What do you think his season's going to be like?
Well, I mean, I actually put a lot of the weight on Mike McCarthy here. I'm a big believer in Dak Prescott. I think that he is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and I get the eye rolls because he needs to go continue to prove that. But to me, the weight of the Cowboys' success is on Mike McCarthy's shoulders. He's the one who said the offense isn't working because of the offensive coordinator. I'm going to step in and change that. Will Prescott be a more efficient quarterback? Let's hope so. But will he also still have the firepower to put up the offense that makes this team still potent? And by the way, being an efficient quarterback does make the defense better. So all around, the team should be better. But again, Prescott, I think will be fine. The question is, will Mike McCarthy's offense?
There you go. Emphasis on should. What do you think?
I think they're going to be more efficient, but they're not going to be as productive. I think Dak Prescott's interceptions last year, a bit of a fluke. He had 3 interceptions that hit receivers in the hands. That's probably not going to happen again. I do think, though, this offense is going to go slower to try and protect the defense. That's what Mike McCarthy has alluded to. And so I think Dak's numbers, interception rate will be lower, but I think the touchdowns will be lower, the yardage will be lower. I think he'll be less of a focal point of the offense than maybe he was past couple of seasons.
Okay, so numbers will be lower, but all that counts in Dallas is winning.
The pressure that's on Jordan Love this year to replace a 4-time MVP, somebody who won a Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers, that's pretty immense. And I'm not saying that eventually he can't get there, but this is somebody we've seen one career start. He's thrown 83 passes as an NFL quarterback. The wherewithal and his knowledge of the scheme, that's no issue. He's been in this offense for 4 years. I just think a young supporting cast around him, a first-year starter, and a team that was 8-9 last year in a wide-open NFC North that's teetering towards the Detroit Lions and Minnesota being ahead of them. I'm not ready. I'm going to pump the brakes on them being NFC North champs just yet, but maybe in a year or two, because it seems like the Green Bay Packers know what they're doing when it comes to the turnover at the quarterback position. Brett Favre had, his success in Green Bay, and then Aaron Rodgers didn't have that much. It wasn't that much fall off from Favre to Rodgers, so maybe it'll be the same here with Jordan Love.
All right, but you're saying, Bill, pump the brakes. What do you think?
Listen, I've been kind of trending towards where Bill is going right now. I think the key for the Green Bay Packers, honestly, is defensive coordinator Joe Barry. Joe Barry needs to get this defense coming out of the gates fast. That side of the ball is extremely talented. They should be really good this year, and they need to play aggressive, because if you got a quarterback who's starting its first season, things could, defense usually starts out faster than offense. So I think this Packers defense, and Joe Barry in particular, has to get this unit coming out of the gates fast. If he can do that, get this unit going fast, I think absolutely think the Green Bay Packers can win the NFC North this year.
Jeff?
I thought that Bill was a more straight-laced guy to be doing drugs before 10 a.m.
This is bold, Bill.
I just didn't. I didn't know that was his vibe. I mean, all 3 of those things you said were absolutely nuts. I guess they were supposed to be bold. I don't believe any of them, but I believe Bill. I'm inclined to believe Bill, even though all of that sounded like pure and utter nonsense.
Wow. Ouch. So you're not buying it. There's no chance they win the NFC North?
Well, I mean, there's a chance the division is wide open, but, to quote Dumb and Dumber, you're just saying there's a chance?
Things move fast in the NFL. If I'd been here last year and I told you the Jaguars were going to win the AFC South, or the Rams would be in last place,
not
or
Jordan
Russell
Love.
Wilson, I said, things are crazy. Things happen so quick in the NFL.
You're crazy,
have to be
Bill.
aggressive.
You're
have to be at
crazy.
least a little bold.
What did you, Jeff? I'll give you another word in there. What did you say?
I just said Bill's crazy. He's crazy.
We're crazy already. Okay, I want to stay in this division because, Courtney, you cover the Bears for us. How far away is Justin Fields and the Bears from contending for a division title?
It's at least a year. This
Okay.
roster, as their general manager Ryan Poles admitted, a couple months ago during free agency, it's going to have holes on it this year. That's not to say that they're going to be in the same spot they were in 2023. They should win more than 3 games. If they don't, then it shows you that their plan isn't working. But I think realistic expectations for this team are to go from 3 wins to anywhere from 7 to 8. I mean, if you have a +5 in the win margin for this team this year, that's pretty remarkable, and that shows you that they're on the right track. But I take a look at this pass rush. It still has not been addressed. They got 7.5 sacks from their defensive linemen last year. They pressured opposing quarterbacks on 22% of pass plays. That's second worst in the NFL. They've still got to address those areas for me to think that this is a team that can contend even in a wide open NFC North.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Courtney. I think they're another year away. They got to continue to stack. They need another year of drafting and free agency to kind of, fully replenish, this roster over. They got some talented pieces. I like some of the moves that they've made, but I just don't think that they're not there yet. They're not there yet.
Yeah, it just feels like they have too many holes. And we'll see what happens with Justin Fields this year. I think everybody's rooting for him, but he's got to have some more development in his game. All right.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.